Tim Bolduc and Jessica Levins are here with me today. They have written a new book, and they collaborated while also being employees of the good city of Crestview, Florida. And so, guys, tell me a little bit about the overview of the book and what you're hoping that working professionals will get out of this product that you've made.
All right, we can definitely do that. I'll go first, and I'll let Jessica jump in and correct me, which is what she usually does. Long and short of it is, a couple of years, about a year and a half ago, we were working through some issues here at the city, and related to the nature of government, sometimes to focus so heavily on the regulation side and less on the resource side. And we come from a mindset of that we're in the public service business. We should be serving the public. What does that look like? What does that mean? It means that we should be connecting people to the resources necessary to execute the things that they're trying to execute. And so, as a result of that, and really out of some frustration, one day I was, kind of stomping around the office like I do from time to time, complaining about the way that sometimes we handle things. And Jess came in and said, well, if you want us to do better, teach us to do better. What do we need to do? And so that day we sat down and wrote out kind of a training program for how to convert the culture in the organization from being regulatory to being resource-based. And so that day we wrote what were the five steps of a solution-focused culture. And then when we sat back and looked at it, we thought, man, maybe this would be beneficial to some others. And so we joked really about writing a book that day. And then, Jess can definitely add to it. There's some, we started getting phone calls about, well, how did you get whatever fixed, whatever piece of the equation fixed. And so,
So what we really hope people take away from it is that organizational change is hard, but there is a way to go about it. And, there's a way to respect your staff and for everyone to, enjoy the work that they do a little bit more. And that if we can do it in government, you can definitely do it in your business.
Right. Yeah. And to understand that there is a process to it, we really believe that, it is possible to find fulfillment in your work and to not have, and there's ways to do that without exercising authority over people. Sometimes in government, people find the greatest level of satisfaction in their ability to tell somebody what to do through either, real authority or just implied or taken authority that they may or may not actually have. What we want to do is get people to find even greater satisfaction in being able to help someone get the project to where it needs to go. And so that's, that was the thought process behind it. And then both of us are pretty big fans of Patrick Lencioni, which is a writer that we've read and taught a lot of his material. And his style of writing is something that we really like.
It's super engaging. He starts with a story. He calls them leadership fables, and then moves into the more, nitty gritty, actionable items towards the end of every book. So ours is the same way. It starts out with a story about the leader of a city, and then it kind of goes from there. In the second half of the book, we do. We go through the 5 steps in more detail and provide some activities to kind of get people started so they don't feel like organizational change is such an overwhelming task.
Yeah. We were sharing this morning that the thought process behind the type of writing for the book is that it doesn't matter where you are in the organization, you can relate to it. If you don't have patience for technical manuals, just read the first half. If you only like technical manuals, just read the second half. If you want both, you can read the whole thing.
And so you guys, I want to go over the 5 steps in detail, but I think the thing that would be important for people that are listening to this is to know what the mindset shift looks like between a regulatory-based organization, that specifically like a city, and then what it happens when you change into a resource-based. What does that look like on maybe a line level employee all the way up to somebody that's like in your position, Tim, that might be an executive director or a city manager?
So if I was going to boil that down into a nutshell, it's kind of the same across the board. When we say regulation, that's when Tim was referencing, when people are asserting their power just to assert the power, saying no just for the joy of saying no. And then when you move to being a resource, I call it a community resource. So you become the person that helps the community member or the customer in whatever other type of business to achieve their success. When we train this, we use the term, corporate success or organizational success is customer success. So you can't have one without the other.
So let me give you an example, Christopher, that's not government. So not too long ago, I went into UPS, the UPS store here in Crestview, and I had purchased something on Amazon. I needed to return it. They have an excellent program, right? You just click some buttons, you take it, you drop it back off, and you don't have to do any packages or anything. Well, in the process of putting my return together, I hit the wrong button. And so the button that I hit provided for me actually printing a label and putting it in a bag like it was 2021 or something, back in the day. And so I show up at UPS and go to try to turn my package in. And instead of saying, hey, the rules say you have to have a label and you have to have a bind, the box to put it in, they said, hey, listen, unfortunately, you might have clicked the wrong button, but if you can go ahead and email me that, I'll print your label for you. There's something right over there. If you grab it off the shelf, we can slip it in here and we'll get you right out of here right away. The regulation said that I had to come with all that stuff, right? But the UPS, because it's private sector and because they manage them well here in Crestview, they wanted to solve my problem. And so for that customer, for me, right, the day was better because they helped a guy who didn't know what he was doing get to where he wanted to go and without any real skin off their neck, right, or nose, whatever. But they helped me get to where I needed to go, and they made me smile. And I told them at the end, I said, man, I really appreciate that. But I can promise you, as sweet of a fella as I am, had they turned me around and I'd had to go home and print that because I'm somewhere where I don't have a printer and all that, my attitude probably would have been completely different. There wouldn't have been, it wouldn't have made their day better. It wouldn't have made my day better. And so that happens a lot in the private sector, not so much in government. And so what we want to do is help our team see that you can get as much or more satisfaction by actually going that extra mile, unlocking the door at 4:00, let them come in, let them pay their bill, even though or help them fill out the form they don't understand. That's what it looks like at the entry level. And then at the higher levels of the organization, it's understanding that you have to empower your people. What we like to do, Christopher, sometimes is we'll create the regulation at the executive level and then expect the people boots on the ground to smile about it while they're doing something that makes no sense to them. They're the subject matter expert, but somebody else set the rule. And so part of what we teach in the book is that you need to have the people closest to the action help you figure out what policy should look like. And when you do that, then your policies will make more sense. And then you also help them understand the bigger picture, which is your mission and your vision and your core values. And as long as they can stay within the mission, the vision, and the core values, they can make decisions at their level to solve the problem for people instead of turning them around to go and come back 20 minutes later just mad.
And so would you say the mission, vision, and values of an organization have to be built out first and clearly defined before they implement this book?
Yes. And so we keep saying, the 5 steps. When we did it at Crestview, when we taught the training, it was the 5 steps of a solution-focused culture. When we wrote the book, it's actually 6. And that first step is to evaluate the organization, whether it's private sector or public sector, to evaluate your organization, and then then you make sure you have a mission and vision. That happens in the book. There's a chapter where they go over that, and then once you've got those in place, then you can go on to the next 5 steps, which then gets you to that solution focus.
All right, so let's go into these 5 steps. Let's start with step 1. What do I know I want to change an organization, like the city of Clearview, for example.
Right.
What do I have to do after I've determined mission, vision, value? This is what we're going to do. We've all gotten together. We've had this talk. We've had a powwow. We all agree like something's got to change. What's step 1?
Step 1 is evaluate. So it's evaluating the organization without stepping in and making any changes. So we cover in the activity section like ride-alongs, like getting in with the frontline staff and seeing how things are really happening without suggesting to them how they do it better, without, talking them through a
Right.
new process, just listening and learning.
Right. So you have to really kind of pay attention to what we teach in Crestview. We teach the difference between a source problem and a symptom problem. And so figuring out, like, a symptom of something, a lot of times we'll go chase trying to solve a symptom when actually it's just something that's showing because there's a much deeper rooted problem. You can't figure out what the deeper rooted issue is if you don't spend the time evaluating it. And so what we talk about in here is high level management, middle level management, taking the time to be in the program, right? We call them ride-alongs. You can work beside them, whatever you want to do, where you're learning what actually happens every day without trying to solve their problems for them, just learning and listening to what they have to say. Once you've evaluated it, then you have kind of a baseline of knowing what you're up against.
And so a guy like me that's been, go ahead. I was going to say a guy like me that has very little management experience, right? Like I see me going out and doing that, right? I'm like very nervous that I'm not getting enough stuff done, right? Like because I'm not changing anything. Well, then today's a wasted day because I didn't implement. So what would you say to people that are real uptight like me?
We actually cover that.
Yeah,
we cover that, and it's one of the things that I teach. I'm teaching it to is that we get so process oriented or product driven oriented maybe that we have to be doing. But it's like the old adage about the guy who sharpens. If you got 2 hours to cut a tree down, the guy sharpens his axe for the first hour and 45 minutes and then cuts the tree down versus the guy who chops for 2 hours straight because he didn't sharpen the axe. Well, it's the same thing, right? So if I just fix a symptom, so if I go and sit next to Susie, which I don't have a Susie, at my water counter, and she has a bad attitude with a customer that comes in, and I just fix her attitude, but I don't sit there long enough to understand that her attitude is the way that it is because our software is not working and this, all of these other contributing factors, then I haven't done anything. All I've done is made the situation worse, and she's just going to tuck it away until it gets worse. So what I would say to people is if you're listening to the book or if you're listening to us right now talk about it and you're saying, look, I'm the CEO of a major organization. I mean, I run an organization that's about $60 million. I've got, 7 or 8 different departments, almost 300 employees, all these kind of things. I have time to go get on a fire truck, but also maybe it's a smaller organization and you're like, well, if I don't work today, then I'm not going to make a dollar. What I would tell you is if that's your mindset right now, I challenge you to take a minute and hear what I'm telling you. You got to sharpen the axe, and you can't do that if you don't know that you have the right tools. You don't know that you're doing, that your process is exactly right. The one day that you invest with Susie or whoever it is can fix a problem that will burn up 35 days in the future. And so if things are running inefficiently now, you not understanding why, the full why behind, the source behind, you're never going to fix it. And so you may not spend that time sitting in the truck with them today and feel like you accomplished more things because you solved their problems. But if you help people figure out how to work through their own issues and empower them to do that, it's a force multiplier. So I have to, if I'm in a small business and I've only got 5 employees and I have to solve everybody's problems all day and that's why I can't ride along with them, maybe I should spend the time with them, helping them or seeing what they're up against so that we can go, because when we go through these next steps, we're going to show you how we create a system that empowers them to figure out how to solve the problems themselves. And now there's 6 people solving problems instead of just me.
Exactly. 1 person solving problems and 5 people creating problems or something like that.
That's right.
More or less. I don't know
story
if
of
that's
my
the case.
life.
But yeah, so we've now evaluated and we've got me to stop implementing stuff willy-nilly. What's step 2?
Establish. So the second step is to establish. We focus on establishing core values. Different organizations may have to establish, all of those things, the mission, vision, policies, all the different things. But in our chapter, we focus on core values because before you can move on, your people need that backstop. They need to know what are the very basic values of the organization to guide them forward.
Right. We believe that, and one of the things we talk about in here as well, Christopher, is that when you're establishing your core values, that that the people on the team have to be a part of it. It's not something you do at the executive level all by itself, because there's a difference between buy-in and ownership, right? We all talk about buy-in. We need to get the team to buy into something. The problem with that is I'm a fairly decent salesman, so I can sell you just about anything. If I get you to buy in, that's great. But then if I'm able to sell you, so will the next salesman. And sometimes the next person that's in front of them is not a good employee. It may be it's an influencer in the organization, but maybe it's a negative influencer in the organization. And so if I've said, hey, we're going to do things this way, and I've got them bought into it, and then the next person comes in and they're negative about it, then they can talk them into not doing it. But if I get the employee to actually own what we're doing, in other words, together we're deciding this is how we're going to do it. Now they have ownership. When Mr. Negative comes in and starts to talk to them, they're going to defend it, because it's not a product they bought, it's a product they own or they developed. And so we want them to have ownership in it. And so that establishment is getting those core values so that you can, and you'll see as we go a little bit further on, so that you can draw a box around why you do what you do. We want you to be able to, I usually use a sports analogy. There's a sports analogy in the book. Jess doesn't love sports analogies, but it's like it's like a quarterback in a football game, right? If the policies or the plays are called into the quarterback, he understands, or he or she understands the mission. His mission is to score, right? He knows that he has to score by following the rules, which are the policies, and staying inside the sidelines. He can't go out of bounds. And so we describe those sidelines as the core values on one side and moral, ethical, and legal on the other side. So if we set up a set of policies and instruct our team to do something, and we say, here's the box you have to play in, if the defense or the problem that comes up makes it so that the policy, the way that it's written, doesn't quite work, they can call an audible, as long as they stay within the sidelines. And so an example I use all the time is we don't give overtime to water clerks. It's not something that we plan on. We close at 4. So if somebody comes to our counter or comes to the door at 4 o'clock, policy says, we'll see you tomorrow. But our mission is to improve the quality of life by providing exceptional municipal services. So my team can call an audible, unlock that door, bring them in, solve their problem, send them on their way. And when we go see overtime on there, we might say, hey, why is there overtime? And they're going to say, because I was fulfilling the mission, right? I did something different necessarily than the everyday policy, but it was moral, ethical, and legal. It met our core values and it met our mission statement, and I moved it towards the end zone. And we're going to say, okay.
And so you've empowered them to do, and I'm probably getting ahead of this, but you've empowered them to call their own plays, right? Essentially. So step 3, tell me step 3.
So step 3 is actually explained. So Tim started to get into some of that with his fun sports analogies. So we move from establishing those values to explaining them, which is really kind of like reiterating the point, making sure each employee, no matter what level of the organization they're in or what their job duties are, understand how the mission, vision, values all applies to what they do every single day in and day out. So that really takes us into, kind of where we're going into, the quarterback taking that and relaying it to his team. So we want every single individual to be able to, when that negative Nancy comes across them, say, well, actually, this is what we do here, and this is why we do it.
Yeah. A lot of times companies will create a mission statement, a vision statement. They'll create core values, and they don't explain to the frontline staff how that connects to what they do every day. And so when the frontline staff gets a T-shirt that says, like for us, a T-shirt that says track on it, that's our core values, right? And so it's teamwork, respect, adaptability, communication, and knowledge. Well, if they don't understand how all of those connect to their water operator job, then it's nonsense, right? It's a waste of time and effort. And so what we're doing is we've evaluated the problems, we've established core values, and then we've gone back and said, now these core values connect to every individual job this way. And so in this step, you're empowering each of the middle management or supervisory to middle management people with what the answers are, so they can relay to their team, this is the why behind what we do. This is why we do things the way we do them, because this is what our core values tell us we're going to do. So now you've explained those things.
It's a very start with
together.
Why kind of step in the process, right? Like if people know why they're doing something, then they'll continue to do it, and they have kind of like the I always kind of go into like the religion apologetics background of like if people know why they believe something, it's a lot easier to defend that, right? You can defend the faith of the water and sewer, core values, because you know them inside and out, right?
Right. You own them. You were a part of us in this particular case. You were a part of establishing them.
So once everything we've kind of gotten through the first half of the process, tell me what step 4 is.
Yeah. So step 4, after we've explained it to them, is then to engage them. And I think this is a piece that gets missed a lot. And this is where, okay, we've, as a leadership team, we've evaluated the problems. We've established core values, guidelines, a box to play in. And then we have explained to the team why those core values are paramount to everything that we do. Now we're going to engage them to evaluate their existing policies, procedures, processes, and tell us, hey, we've said this is what you're supposed to do every day and this is how you're supposed to do it. But now that you know behind us what the most important pieces are, the backstop, as Jess said, you look at what you do every day and then tell me, does it make sense? If I'm telling you to improve the quality of life for your customers, but I'm saying you can never have overtime, those two things don't line up if somebody comes in late, right? And I'm not going to necessarily know that. All I know is numbers on a budget. They know what's happening every day in the field. And so the next step is to engage them to evaluate their own policies to tell us what the problems are.
Right. And then we move on to empowering. So if we've got our policies.
So is there like a time period in between 4 and 5, right? Because when I hear it, right, I hear like, okay, they need a trial period to like write this stuff down, right? And say like, hey, these are the things that you want us to do, and this is why this stuff doesn't work. What do you think? Is that kind of the idea behind that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So what happens is once the core values have been established and explained to them, that sinks in, and then you go back and you say, now also with every training that we do, and me in particular, is that I'm going to, from the beginning of the training, I'm going to tell you, eventually you're going to help me figure this out for you. So from the beginning, the staff has known that at some point we're
doing the evaluate process. That very much starts. So when you're being quiet, you're asking. You're not quiet in the sense that you can't ask questions. You're quiet in the sense that you don't give the answer.
You'll see in the book, we relay that in the novel part of the book or the fable portion of the book. There's a conversation that TJ has with one of the water clerks, front counter clerks, and there's this whole exchange about the software. And so he gets done at the day, and she's packing up in the story, she's packing up her stuff to go pick up her grandkids. And as he's walking out, he turns around and says to her, hey, if we set up a process improvement team, would you be interested in participating? And so even though it was long before she was going to be able to actually have an input in what happened around her, she was hearing that later on down the road she's going to get a chance to be a part of the improvement team. And so what's funny in the book is it says, we put this one in there because this is typical government, and her response to him is, yeah, as long as it's not like last time. And so he says, well, what happened last time? And she says, nothing. Right, because that's what you typically do. You ask a bunch of questions and never fix anything. So but that's what's going on in that scene, is we're trying to get you to see a picture of, you need to be letting them know that they're going to be a part of the solution.
I'm sorry, will you tell me what number 5 is?
It's empower. So the 5th step is empower. So we've got our policies, we've got our values, we've gone through all those processes, and then we start to empower the frontline staff or whatever level is appropriate to start making some of those decisions on their own, to know that, they are empowered to get that 10 minutes of overtime to make sure the customer gets what they need, because they know what our values are, they know what the policies are and the parameters in which they can safely work between and still accomplish the goal.
How long does this process, do you guys feel like it lasts? So from day one, where you say, okay, we're going to implement this policy, to you've empowered them, you feel like you've successfully done it, and I imagine there might be cycles of this, right? But like, how long does an implementation cycle last for something like this?
Yeah, so depending on the size of the organization, for sure. But an organization with any size at all, this is a year or so that you're walking through these steps. These things don't happen overnight for a couple of different reasons. One, fatigue. Two, you have to do the job that you're actually supposed to be doing. But also there is a curve to the learning that occurs. The further down the road you get, like this engaging stage, you don't want them to just list off all the policies they don't like. You want to be able to challenge, okay, well, I understand that you don't like to fill out this piece of paper, but help me figure out what's the better way, because this is the reason that we do it. You see what I mean? So those things will take time. And depending on, quite frankly, how dysfunctional the organization is, it can take longer. Here, I'm not going to say that Crestview was dysfunctional by any means, but this was we did this process for 3 years before we even wrote the book, before we knew what we were doing. It was afterwards that we said, hey, that's why when we wrote the training the first time, it was 5 steps, because I had already spent years evaluating, right? The problem with the evaluation process that Tim had done then was that I was evaluating and fixing at the moment. And so we learned along the way that we didn't need to do that. So I would just say, if if it's a small business, you might be able to do it in 6 months, but really, just like strategic planning, Christopher, the best gain in strategic planning is in the process. It's the process that makes it better, not necessarily the product on strategic planning or anything else, right? So yes, the product is important, but where you make your gains is where people begin to feel self-worth, and they begin to feel engaged and feel a part of the team and all of those things. And so that's why the last step is experience, and it is just that we experience success. And Jessica, I put together the majority of the novel side. Jess puts together the majority of the technical side of the book. We make a great team. But on the technical side, she does a good job of reminding you that experiencing success means you got to review. You got to go back and challenge yourself again, because new things come up and new policies get created, and there's department head meetings that occur, or board meetings that occur, and you decide you're going to make a change without talking to the subject matter experts. So it's an ongoing process. Of course, it's easier every time, but it's an ongoing process.
You really have to remember that human component and experience
success of this implementation in your own eyes. Like, what do you say is a successful implementation of this program?
So a successful implementation you see in your people, in the people you work with the most. So we joke about it here when we say, that's we'll use our motto, and we'll be like, that's somebody that understands the motto or the mission. And it's just by observing the behaviors themselves. You were asking, how long do you think it takes? I'd say a year is the minimum, because there's so many things that, especially in our world, only happen once a year. And so to really evaluate all those things, it takes a while, but also you move from each step based on what you see, based on the change that you see. So, if you don't feel like everyone's engaging or enough people are engaging, you can't move on to the empowering step. And so once you get to that empowering step, though, after that, you should start seeing, small bits of success in the change in each person. And, we really go based off of attitude almost, because organizational change is about people.
It's the internal attitude. Yeah. So the byproduct, it goes back to source versus symptom. So the byproduct is people on the outside are happy, but the actual, the evidence of this thing occurring is when your people inside your organization are telling you that they got to solve somebody's problem today. When I walk by and they go, hey, Mr. Tim, today so-and-so forgot their whatever, and this is what I did to solve it. And they're telling me about it. Or this morning, my planning administrator came in and was telling me about an alternative way that he figured out to solve a problem we had related to some annexation and providing utilities to him. But the bottom line was that the manual said do it this way, and then he came in and said, hey, listen, this is what I'm thinking about our problem. This is how I think I'm going to solve it. To me, that's how you measure the success. And eventually you start to hear it from the outside. People will say, hey, how is it that you get something done so quickly, or whatever it is? But really, for you, for the leader, for us, it's seeing it in the people, seeing their satisfaction in what they do, or the types of stories they tell us. I'll give you an example and then I'll shut up about it. But there was a time when I had a particular employee at some point in the history of my career who would love to come in and tell me about how they, were able to just knock somebody over the head by finding all of the problems on their job site, right? Inspections. So finding all the problems on a job site. Same employee, when I see them now, will say, "Hey, check this out. I got to talk to this particular developer or builder about a better way to make sure that their team doesn't miss this problem again." And that's a real world scenario from here, where I had and the employee was always the best at inspections I've ever known. And I used to I sat on a gubernatorial board and licensed inspectors all over the state. But this guy is the best I've ever seen. He remembers things better than anybody I've ever known. But we've taken him from being incredibly technically sound to being a resource to everyone who comes into our community. He used to tell me about all the things he caught wrong at places. Now he tells me about they brought in a whole group of contractors and taught them how to do the software. And so his bragging story to me was about how another municipality wanted to come in and use the same model on teaching their guys how to fill out the software. What they measure as finding worth in the day is really how you can measure, are you moving the needle? And that's an example, a real world example of that.
I almost said Tim Levins and Jessica Bolduc. What I need to say is Tim Bolduc and Jessica Levins have put together a new book called A Solutions-Focused Culture, and it is available on Amazon right now, I believe. And it's also in his hand. There it is.
It is.
And Audible.
So you guys can get a hold of it.
Yeah.
Also on Audible.
It's also on Audible.
Do you read
it? No. Everybody's asked that question, but nobody wants to listen to this for 4.5 hours. I promise you.
Mood, kind of like the vibe is good. So I'd listen to it. Anyway, they've written a book on a solutions-focused culture and how to make a city really a great place to work and how that goes on to help the citizens. So guys, thank you so much for your time today. All right.
Thank you.
Jessica,
thanks, bud.
thank you so much
See you
for
later.
your time. I'm sorry that I've taken you for so long, but I can talk, so I don't know what to tell you.